Hi, everyone. So last week I started a discussion on experience versus science. And I just want to continue with that conversation because it's such an important one. I mean, the number of people that I see that seem to hand themselves over completely to doctors saying, yeah, do whatever needs to be done. You know the science. So tell me the science and let's follow through with that. So they kind of then hand themselves over in a way, give permission to the doctor to treat them in whatever way science says is the most appropriate way for that particular disease. Yeah, and then there is someone like me who's got 40 years experience in medicine and knows that it doesn't always work so clearly. That we need to approach it in a more. The fact is that we're dealing with complexity here. We're dealing with a human being that is not just a machine, but is a matter, energy, informational system, and a body, emotions, mind, spirit, consciousness. So we're dealing with on multiple levels. And what science can measure is a small part of that. Now, I don't want to throw away science because it's certainly very valuable, and scientific medicine is incredibly valuable in the way that it can approach a whole range of diseases today. But the problem is that when you're actually dealing with a person in front of you, the person has a history. The person has a whole range of aspects that are not measurable, like emotions, like consciousness, like feeling, like a whole range of parts which cannot be touched, not by science anyway. So science can measure the matter body, can measure physiology, can measure a whole range of other aspects that are kind of important. Can measure quality of sleep, sort of. But remember, the quality of sleep is based on measurement. So it's not really talking about quality, it's talking about quantity. How much you are in deep sleep and how much you are in more superficial sleep patterns. But that is not exactly measuring quality. It's assuming that what you're measuring is quality, but actually it's quantity. So we need to be careful in how science words things and what it's pointing to. It's pointing to certain signals, as it were. The ECG gives us some measurement of heart, but it doesn't tell us everything. In fact, a lot of it can't be measured. Even if you do an angiogram of the heart blood vessels, it can only see the big blood vessels and not the small blood vessels. So we don't really truly know how the circulation of the heart is functioning. We get ideas, and based on ideas we can create protocols, but actually it doesn't give the full story, and certainly doesn't give anything about the person who is affecting physiology by their thinking and their emotions and the way and the meaning that they give to things. So we're dealing with much more complexity over here. So how do we then approach ill health? Do we trust the science or do we trust our experience? I think we need to be careful here. Both are incredibly valuable, but in the end, the person needs to make the call. And one has to be careful in not handing completely over to the doctor. I mean, the medical profession advises all kinds of things around, let's say, vaccinations. And I think there's enormous value in vaccinations, but there's also a downside. And that downside, can vary from person to person as well. So what I'm pointing to here is the fact that science has its limits, but yet extremely valuable. In the same way as I've pointed out many times before, that You want to learn to drive a car, you need to know the technique. You need to know the physical aspects of driving. But somewhere along the way, you kind of let go all that. And then you drive with some other kind of intelligence operating in you. So there is this quality that is where we sit. Human beings sit in a very interesting space where the science is useful, but is limited. Of course, we're dealing with enormous complexity with regard to human beings. And what we can measure is little bits and pieces, very valuable. But as a student of Chinese medicine and acupuncture, I just recognize how valuable the experience of these Chinese practitioners over thousands of years led to the accumulation of information which produced the traditional approach to healing, and how valuable it is. So while we often say things like modern medicine is really, really good for acute conditions, but when it comes to chronic conditions, yeah, it's helpful, but how helpful it is. And is it really true that modern medicine is really good for acute conditions and we must follow the doctor's instructions under those conditions? But I've seen so many incredible results with acupuncture with acute conditions, acute back problems. Acupuncture is a treatment of choice. The use of low-energy lasers, for example, again, even in acute conditions, can do much better, give much better results than anti-inflammatories and other approaches like that. So even in acute conditions, homeopathy can help in acute conditions in children. So that's my experience. Not a lot of science to it, but my experience after 40 years of practicing and trying to understand the nature of healing, I've come to the conclusion that it's not straightforward, that sometimes science is incredibly valuable. But in the end, I've got to go on my experience. So young doctors go on science because that's their safety margin. But after 40 years of experience, you know when you can use science and when you have to be more careful, and when more natural approaches and lifestyle management are much better for that particular person. So have I answered the question of science versus experience? I think that we need both. And sometimes experience is much more valuable. And sometimes experience tells me that I need to use the science, because then the science is actually useful. So, yeah, just keep in mind that we're dealing with complexity, that a human being is not a machine. A human being is a matter, energy, informational system, and a body, emotions, mind, spirit, consciousness. We have all these dynamics, and most of those dynamics cannot be measured. So science is useful but limited. Experience is great, but also has its limitations, and we need to find a way to work with both. Have a good day.